round, so please be seated. Welcome back once again. Now we are entering into the technical session. I invite Chair of the technical session, Professor V.K. Sharma. बोल दे। Chair of the technical session, sir. As chair has taken a seat, that is Professor V.K. Sharma. Now I invite other speakers also. Shri N.M. Prosti, ex-chairman Sphere India. Shri Nishish Kumar, Knowledge Links. Dr. Shyamla Mani, NIUA. And Control Shri Sanjay Shrivastava.
I हाँ हाँ ठीक
Now, I request Professor V.K. Sharma to take over the technical session.
Thank you very much, and I will request all the participants to take seat, please. And people who are sitting in the back, they can come forward. I welcome my, distinguished panelists on the dais. All are my very close friends, basically. Shri N.M. Prustiji. I know him, since last 25 years and his contribution in this area. Nitish ji, I think it's again 3 decades association with Nitish, and such a committed person in not only in disaster management but sustainable development. Madam Dr. Shamla Mani ji, a known name, in the urban planning, and my friend Colonel Sanjay Srivastav, who is in fact, in my session, I was going to mention about this lightning, but I didn't, because I thought that Sanjay Srivastav is the person. When he is here, I think let him, do justice, with this disaster. He's a very committed person, and he has really done remarkable job in last 1 or 2 years in this area.
The first one to talk about lightning.
Yeah, lightning, that's right. So he initiated this new discussion, and we are now thinking it very seriously, and some of these states, they are going to have their plans. And friends, I think this first technical session after inauguration, I think this will set the tone, for the whole discussion, because all the panelists, sitting here, all 4, they are very distinguished and they are very knowledgeable. In fact, we established this fact in the inauguration that environment, climate change, of course, is part of, environment and disaster risk reduction. These 2 things are not separate subject. And in case we are talking about sustainable development, then definitely, you will have to see these 2 things. World Bank is saying that more than 2% of our GDP loss is there because of natural disaster. I am saying that data is old data. If you see this year's loss, economic loss, India has achieved a lot. In human life saving, we have achieved a lot. But economic loss is increasing. Every year we are having more and more economic loss. And in case India wants to become 5 trillion economy, then I think we will have to think that how we do, disaster risk reduction, and how to link, these 2 aspects or 3 aspects basically: sustainable development goals, climate change, and risk reduction. We have, as I told you, the dons, and they can speak the whole day on these subjects. Each one of, all 4 panelists. I congratulate, the organizer for selection of such people and how you could get, them. So my appreciation, for selection of the panelists. And without taking much time, because we are already 1 hour behind the schedule, and people make me chairman because of one reason, that I take care of time. So this is this is one quality which people have noticed, and I will see that before 2 o'clock we can have our lunch. So I will request my colleagues that they should be 10 minutes each, to each of the speaker, and then more time for discussion, because I could see some students also, some NGOs, and people may be having many questions. So I think it should be both-way process. It should not be one way, that only we speak and you just listen. And so I think I will start with the Shri Prustiji, who is well known in this area, worked with different organizations, worked with international agencies, with USAID, with UN, and long experience of disaster risk reduction. So he will be talking on risk reduction and sustainable development goal, linking the two. Over to you, sir.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Professor Sharma, for accommodating us in the technical session. Thank you, the organizers, to have invited for this session. Its mandate is to talk about the big subject in 10 minutes, which is not easy. And I have a problem of overstepping the time limits always, and that's the only point where me and my guru, Professor Sharma, we differ, but otherwise there are many things that we agree. But I'll definitely respect because that's the important dimension. So I have 8 points I have noted, so I'll like to take 1 minute on each point. So after 10 minutes, maybe more important will be some questions if we can discuss. What happens in a disaster? I have tried to conceptualize that there are 3 big things that happen. Number 1, that your business gets affected. Many people think that business is immune to disaster, but business is one of the worst sufferers in disaster. There are instances that many business have stopped, many business profitability has gone down, the volume has gone down, the inventory has destroyed, supply chain has been disturbed, and so on things. So it's a subject by itself. And then next important thing happens, you must have seen that whenever there is a disaster, the government gets pushed and pulled to deal with the disaster. So I'll say that governance gets affected. Everybody, law and order, your development, your land records, everything, everybody gets assigned to disaster management task. And then the third important thing that happens is the social sector. And predominantly social sector is on your health, education, water sanitation, agriculture, tribal development, horticulture, you name anything, and we are a welfare country and our development domain is very, very large, and that gets affected. So we have to think about disaster risk reduction and management in a manner that governance stays uninterrupted, business stays uninterrupted, and development remains unaffected. This is the goal. If we work, strategize, plan, and act towards these goals, then we will be able to deal with disaster risk reduction or disaster management. That's number 1 point. Then the second point I want to emphasize that we say that natural disaster and man-made disaster, and then say the technology-led disasters and all that. But actually, if you look at that, the natural disaster component in the disaster domain are very little. Many of the disasters which we say natural disaster are also human-induced disaster. Today, the urban flood happening everywhere is not a natural disaster. Don't blame climate change. It is our inefficiency, our irresponsible development that is responsible for this. In fact, one of my guru, his name is Bhaskar Barua, who was the secretary overseeing the disaster management just before the Disaster Management Act was formulated and NDMA was formed and all that. And he used to say that there is hardly anything which we can say that this is a natural disaster. It's an earthquake, maybe one disaster which we can say, but rest of the disasters are in many ways they are linked with human action. So these are all human induced. Sir. We are responsible for those disasters. So our act should be set right to deal with those disasters. So what is necessary is that let us look for solution at source. Where the disaster is coming from. We are not addressing the solution at source. Take a very simple example of waste management. In waste management, they say that the waste has to be managed, waste has to be segregated, but waste need to be segregated at source. But when we are unable to do that, then rest of the things are getting much more complicated and all that. So like this, if you look at every disaster, if you analyze the value chain, you will discover that we are very rarely attempting to find solution at source. We are trying to fix it on the way. And as a result, our preparedness, our response, our recovery programs are always below the requirement. Then, therefore, almost about 15 years now, government has declared that disaster management and development are to be mainstream. The disaster management has to be mainstream, and this becomes an integral part of the development process. But what action is done to do that? There is no comprehensive thinking, there is no comprehensive process, there is no comprehensive budgetary allocation, there is no comprehensive institutional structure, there is no comprehensive assessment, audit and management of these mainstreaming activities. We ought to look at that, how do we mainstream? So therefore, 15 years we have passed, this policy has been declared by Government of India, and all NGOs are talking about, all corporates are talking about, all CSR are talking about, all seminar, workshop. So this has remained as a topic of talk in the workshops and seminar. We have no concrete plan and strategy. So this is one important thing, that mainstreaming must be demystified, what it is. Then the first thing that comes to my mind when we are talking about this disaster risk reduction, that what is risk assessment? Because there are some risks, and those risks need to be assessed, risks to be identified. And today, there is no protocol for disaster risk assessment. Because in the environment impact assessment, there is some small elements where these things are being talked of. So, in spite of the pressure from the civil society and the academia, it is this still the disaster risk assessment has not been recognized as an element of planning. This is still under environmental impact assessment and is not doing justice. If disaster risk assessment would have taken place, Baroda, being a planned city, would not have survived with 10 feet water for 10 days. That is Prime Minister's constituency, one of the best cities of the country, and it remained underwater. Patna, today we are seeing, the government is in trouble because of this. All urban floods, and I am seeing very soon Delhi will also witness, Gurgaon will witness, Noida will witness, all these things will witness. We have if you look at in the opening session, I was listening that we are being talked about the water and climate and all that. Every place used to have a water buffer. There used to be rain, and water used to get accumulated at some buffers. They used to be called wetland. And wetland as natural creations. And today, these natural creations, these wetlands are being encroached. Natural drainage system has been covered, and this is why this is happening. This is happening just because of to meet the grid, that these are at the center of the city. So if there is some infrastructure, some housing, there will be a lot of money coming, and the beneficiaries are who? People are beneficiary, and the political system, executive system, everybody is a beneficiary. But at the end, we are spending 100 times more of that benefit in dealing with the disaster. We saw a Supreme Court judge was rescued by a High Court judge. Is it what that should happen? And look at, if that is the case with the better offs, then what must be the condition of people at the lowest level of the society? So there has to be a risk assessment. For every development work, there has to be a risk assessment, and then that planning must be done. It should be a prerequisite, and after that planning is done, then the risk management plan is being implemented, or infrastructure development when is done. Then there is a protocol of audit. Everything we do, we have identified, then we have prepared a plan to manage it, and then whether we have managed it all right or not, there is a protocol for audit. So we should have a risk audit, and then correction need to be take place. If we are able to do this in a very comprehensive, strategically and technical manner, or a professional manner, then only we will be able to deal with the disaster in the right context. The last point, today, fortunately, technology is coming as a big savior. The technology is not, many people used to think that technology is going to replace human endeavor. But technology is perfecting human endeavor and expanding. In fact, technology is creating much more employment than when the technology was not there, the employment, and when technology comes into our amidst us, then our employment is increasing. So therefore, technology is not our enemy, technology is our friend, and we must use, and technology is a great enabler in disaster risk reduction and management. One small example. Today, I think my friend Colonel Sanjay will talk about lightning. Lightning is one of the big element, big disaster component which was never talked of. He is the man who, for the first time in the country, who alerted. And when he started disclosing these informations and all that, everybody thinks, is it so big? So, and today, the climate, our weather forecasting has improved significantly. But this weather forecast can be much more accurate, much more smarter, much more efficient and effective if we are able to collect localized weather data. And there has to be, therefore, localization is important. There are three elements of localization. One is localization of data and information. Second is localization of resource. And when I talk about resource, it's not money. It is money and human resource and knowledge resource. And then third is localization of capacity. And then who is at the closest to the affected community? This is people. So how those institutions, those community and the community institutions become stronger and efficient and effective, then our disaster risk reduction effort will be much more impacting. No longer people from foreign countries or people from state capitals or national capitals will fly down to the disaster affected area and help people. They will take 10 days to understand the local context. So therefore, it is necessary that localization should be the first and foremost strategy for disaster risk reduction and all that. And in the technology application, let me tell you that today the artificial intelligence and machine learning, there are two things that is coming, the robotics that is coming in such a big way. The whole game is changing. And today, the risk assessment, the post-disaster state government used to prepare damage report to make a claim or put a demand to the government of India. And they used to send people, the revenue officers and the staff will go and calculate, collect census and all that. Let me tell you, the Odisha government declared, the Chief Minister declared that everybody who has lost one coconut tree will get 500 rupees. So how do you know who has lost coconut tree? Then this is our horticulture officers and district administration officers will go and make a census, and within 15 days they'll get. So I went to the field with those people and I said, how do you do the census? Sir, is it possible to count coconut trees? We went to the village and asked people, hey, how many trees you have? So whoever told how many trees, that became our information, and that came. So what is this? This technology today will be able to tell you that how many coconut trees were there, how many coconut trees are broken, houses, how many houses were there, how many houses are broken, what is the level of damage, all this technology can tell you all those things. We have got satellite data, which is macro level data. Then we can use this artificial intelligence and drone, and you can get micro level data. When you superimpose this micro level data and macro level data and our revenue records and all that, you will get much more accurate and fair information. There is no question of manipulation. Government officers, they get afraid that if my information will be right, what will happen? If my information is wrong, what will happen? They are, either way, they are at risk. So the technology is going to strengthen their capacity, strengthen their hand, and their conviction to bring change in the government. Therefore, once there is a very eminent one, the former Secretary of Rural Development, when we were discussing, he said that technology is going to be the game changer, and it will be making the development governance much smarter. And if we want to really improve our development governance in this country, I think there is no greater support than the technology, and we must work with the technology. So these are some of the points. I think I have taken 10 minutes. 20 minutes.
But it doesn't matter, it was very informative, and I know, the vast knowledge which you have, and I can say only 2-3 things. I fully agree with you, sir. Science and technology and its use. Basically, you very rightly said that even damage assessment, you can be very precise. You can, because today our ISRO, they have so much of data, so much of information. The only thing is that you should have a state-of-the-art, emergency operation center where you get each and every information. I think very important point. And sir, your second point that now the face of disasters is changing, and unless and until we change accordingly, we cannot cope up with the natural calamities. Sir, thank you very much. I mean,
Thank you.
It was. Keep your questions, with you, because I will be requesting you to ask questions to the panelists later, because there is a time constraint. Otherwise, you are free, and I love, discussion. There is no problem. In fact, one point which is Padma Shri Bhaiji was saying to me at tea time, that we are forgetting one thing. We are going for science and technology, no problem. But his point is our traditional wisdom. In case there is a proper marriage of the science and traditional wisdom, I think this will be. And India is having lots of knowledge, which is people are forgetting rather and not using it today. So again, documentation of those practices, and that is also important. But thank you, sir. We have, next speaker is again my very close friend, Nitish ji. I met him for the first time in '92 in Nainital. And I remember I was in Middle East, for about 20 years. So I was asking him, should I go back, because I was professor in Kuwait. And after this war, they invited me again that you come back to Kuwait. So I remember, Nitish ji, you told me one sentence that, in Middle East you can get only money. But in India, you get, some other thing, some other pleasure. And my request will be that in case you spend time, now 20 years is enough, the Banbas bhi 14 saal ka hota hai. You are more than that. So we know each other since long time, and now he is having his own organization, Knowledge Link, and he is helping Government of India. He was part of this cyclone, mitigation program of Government of India, and working very closely with several state government. Over to you, sir. And
thank you, sir.
Give your experiences, but again, time constraint.
I'll try and be brief. Let me begin by congratulating International Institute of Disaster Management for organizing this conference on climate change and disaster resilience. I will try and shift the focus a bit. A lot of ground has already been covered, and I would not like to go over some of them. I may touch a bit. Prusti Saab just mentioned that looking for solution at source. So, let me take you to the source. And where did it all begin? And if we go by available science, then we know that the entire cosmos, the entire world that is there, that is known, actually started as the result of a big bang, some 15 billion years back. So this is brief history of time, Stephen Hawking. And so this big bang led to this formation of billions of galaxies and billions of solar systems. As per that book, if I am not mistaken, there are some 100 billion galaxies, and each galaxy has about 100 billion solar systems. So now our galaxy, Milky Way, is one of those galaxies, one of those solar systems. So now the Earth, as a part of the solar system, was born around 4.9 billion years back. So 4.9 billion years back, for first 900 million years, it was like a ball of fire. So it was, because solar system is formed when an old star crumbles, so the core remains as the sun, and the rest debris is formed in planets and all that. So Earth is born, and so 900 million years, and then the Earth starts cooling, and then the oceans are formed, and early life forms some 4 billion years back in the form of bacteria, and then unicellular organisms, and then the human beings. And human beings are the latest arrivals. We are the newest born, if you like. Only 5 million years, that also is contested. The known history that we have is about 10,000 years. So, so human beings have arrived at the end, and now I read recently in a report, probably Greenpeace or something, that some 1 million species are disappearing every year. This is the rate of disappearance of other life forms because of human beings. Now, if we look at from the perspective of nature, there is no disaster. In nature, there is no disaster. There are only changes in forms of matter. Energy, Big Bang, then matter, galaxy, solar systems, Earth, Sun, and all that. Earth is a ball of fire for 900 million years, no problem for nature. Nature is not bothered. But disaster and climate change becomes an issue because of the human beings and because of the civilization and culture that we had developed, and we need to protect it, we need to be safe. That is, so now let me briefly underline the contradiction that is inherent in the development and climate change and disaster. Now, the simplest definition of development is Robert Chambers, and that is the best definition, I think. Good change. Good change is development. If things are changing for the better, it is development. And what is disaster? If we use the same simple definition, then it is a bad change. If things are going worse, then it is a bad change. Now, look at the development. Professor Sharma mentioned 5 trillion economy. Our government and our Prime Minister says that the aspiration of the country is to be a 5 trillion economy. Now, when we say 5 trillion economy or 7 trillion economy or 10 trillion economy, it means a certain amount of carbon footprint. You cannot have an economy of that scale without having a very clear, visible carbon footprint. Now, what is carbon footprint? I think all of you know. But because we are talking about climate change, and it was mentioned earlier on that climate change is due to global warming. Now, why global warming? Global warming largely due to burning of fossil fuels largely. There are other activities also, and largely burning of fossil fuels, coal, petroleum. So, in order to develop, you need to burn these, and they emit carbon. Now, other activities also, forest fires and other human activities also lead to this carbon footprint. Right now, if you see our economy is in a massive slowdown, one of the major concerns is that car sales have gone down. Manufacturing is, we have just recorded the lowest industrial output, 1.1 or something, lowest since 2012. So, car sale is a measure of growth because this will add to your economy. But when car running on this thing and burning fossil fuel, it will generate carbon, ultimately leading to climate change. Now, so without development, you cannot, I mean, development is important. There is nobody can dispute that, because in order to lead a good life, good quality of life, you need development, you need infrastructure, you need roads, you need other facilities, and more people getting used to it in urban centers and even in rural areas. So now that is a need which has a carbon sort of consequence, and then you have to deal with it. Now, what are the impacts? What are the impacts of climate change? And there were some anecdotes which are very good. A friend of mine recently went to Geneva a couple of bags for a meeting at his headquarters in WSSCC, and he said he came after 5 days, and he said that I could not sleep even one day. I said, what happened? He said the hotel room, it was so hot, some 38 degrees, there is no AC, there is no fan, because those structures are built for very cold climates. And he says, you can't even open the window. Even if you open the window, still there is no respite and you can't sleep. See. And somebody mentioned cars floating in the streets of Madrid and other places. There was a heat wave in Europe, Paris and other places. And those structures are designed for very different kind of climate, but the climate has changed and now you have to readjust. So the point basically that I'm trying to make is that there is a trade-off between development and disaster. While there is a national imperative, there is a need as a country to develop, where you need to be a 5 trillion economy. So the most of your budget will go in infrastructure, because you have to compete with others, so it will go in defense, and then it will go in other places, but which will mean that you will have less budget for agriculture, you will have less budget for education, you will have less budget for health, you will have less budget for disaster management. So the more money that you are spending is actually generating some kind of carbon footprint. You have less money to deal with it. I will end with a metaphor that the kind of life that we lead, we love eating, so I have to eat rich food. I'm a smoker, so I smoke. And because this is all important, and I have to travel, so I will sit in a car, and I will sleep in an AC room, and this makes life comfortable. But if you look at all of these, they all have consequences in terms of your health risk, which from a global perspective is your disaster risk of the body. So, but we will do all this, we will not cut down on that. We will go to a doctor or to a Ayurveda and say that what should we do now? I don't want to stop this, I will eat this, I will smoke, I will do this, I will sleep in AC, but and D3 will be low, there will be no vitamin B12 and all those things. But we will never connect that these are related. And that's exactly what is happening in development and mainstreaming. I fully agree with Prusthi Saab that we have to move beyond rhetoric. That yes, mainstreaming is good, how will you mainstream? And actually if you ask, that is the only solution. Because 80%, 90% of your budget is being spent on issues. If you're building infrastructure, unless you build in disaster risk reduction element there, you cannot achieve disaster risk reduction through an SDMA or International Institute of Disaster Management or knowledge links, or so all the four players, government and civil society organizations, academic institutions, and private sector, they have to come together. But in this coming together, there is a catch. There are conflicts of interest. You know, government has to spend budget on things which will generate more carbon. Private sector will has industries and they have their interests, so that will also create issues. Builders have to build, whether it blocks the natural drainage system or it destroys the wetlands. That's not an issue. That will be done because metro will be built and thousands of trees will be cut because there is an imperative, Dr. Beeta Singh mentioned. So where do we arrive at the trade-off? How do we go about it? How do we navigate? I think the only solution is that we build multi-stakeholder partnerships and we work around the interests and agree towards a shared action way forward. And I think that can be done, and this conference itself and many other substantive engagements of a different nature can help us go on this path where we can build a really climate resilient development model. And I hope there will be many opportunities to take it forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nitish ji, and I fully agree that you have raised a very pertinent question. Environment and development basically, and I think now I can give example of two countries, India and China. So both are China. You have seen that how much development China has done in last 10-15 years, and same thing is in India. Our development is also phenomenal. At the same time, both the countries, they are much ahead than any other developing countries in, for example, using solar radiation. We are going beyond our target, which we promised in the last COP. And same is China, that the non-renewable source of energy, water, wind, solar, they are also going in, so I think this is one good thing also, that with the development or with the carbon footprint, you very rightly said, that the carbon footprint will increase. And in 5 trillion economy also, in case we are talking about this economy, definitely, there will be more carbon footprint, but in case we keep our promise of plantation or International Solar Alliance, we are talking that all the 60 countries have already signed with India. So I think India is taking lead in it. And in case we are successful in that, then definitely it will be a big achievement. Friends, solid waste, which is very important issue nowadays. You go to any part of Delhi, NCR, you will see mountains of solid waste. And the next speaker will be talking on waste management, and particularly I think she will give more emphasis on recycling, reuse of this solid waste issues and challenges. Dr. Shamla Mani, and ma'am, you have 10 minutes.
Can somebody? Thank you, respected Chairperson and friends. I'm indeed thankful to the Indian Institute of Disaster Management for giving me this opportunity to speak with you on waste management and issues and challenges. Like the previous speakers have already mentioned, global climate change has led to the destabilization of Earth's climate, and we know that greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, but also methane, which is emanated from especially decomposition of wet organic matter which is in anaerobic condition, in the absence of air. So methane in fact has a potential of more than 23% higher than carbon dioxide, and therefore very often waste managers are asked to say what they're going to do about the methane which is coming out of waste. The likely effects we have already spoken: rise in sea level, progressive increase in temperatures. We have heat wave deaths, people have mentioned this, my previous speakers, and intensification of the hydrological cycle. So we have been having cyclones, we have had very intense events which happen once in 100 years or 200 years have started happening once in 20 years or 10 years. And that's one of the reasons why whatever the kind of planning that's done in the country is not sufficient, and we are generally caught off guard. But also because the urban planning which used to be adhered to in previous centuries, I would say, is no longer applicable. Many people have already spoken before me about the fact that natural drainages have been overbuilt, wetlands have been overbuilt, and we seem to be thinking that the only way to move forward is what my previous speaker said, that development is the only way we can go forward, and environment can be sacrificed at the altar of development. So the natural disaster very often is asked whether it's a cause or effect, and we have had any number of these kind of issues, tsunamis or Hurricane Katrina, or these are some of the old ones, or right at our backyard, the kind of disasters that keep happening in Mumbai or Chennai or Bengaluru or even Srinagar and now Patna. So these are issues which have been created, like most of us have said, about man-made. They are all man-made disasters, and the waste management has been connected with these. The reason because waste itself, by its very nomenclature, means that you don't have any use for it. That's why you throw it. But also, how do you throw it and where do you throw it? That's what is the entire impact that it can cause. And like many of my previous speakers have mentioned, the poor and the have-nots are the ones who are affected by this kind of disaster. One, also because they are dependent on the waste, and till today they have been the ones who have managed the waste. In fact, if you go to our urban areas or rural areas, you will find that these people who have absolutely nothing to rely on, not even agriculture, are the people who have been managing our waste for so long. And a rough calculation says that more than 15 to 20% of the waste is actually being handled by them and put away, from harm's way, because of their very, very meticulous way of collecting it and taking it and getting it recycled, or taking it to locations where it needs to be handled. But the unfortunate part is that just a small group of people, who have absolutely no wherewithal and who have not been given any kind of empowerment, either financially or physically, expecting them to solve the problem that you have caused is really not the right thing to do. Look at the size of the Indian urban areas. We have more than 4,378 statutory towns and cities. We have more than almost 8,000 cities, which include the census towns as well. And today, when we started in 2014, the gap in services of sewage and sanitation, even in urban areas, was reasonably high in terms of not just having toilets, but also the kind of treatment of the septage and the sewage that is generated. And even in the service level benchmarks in 2015, we found that more than 2/3 of the excreta or the fecal sludge that comes out of toilets are not processed at all, and they were going into surface water bodies, mainly rivers and lakes, and also going sometimes underground and contaminating our water sources. So one of the biggest challenges that even Swachh Bharat has faced, I'm one of the persons who is helping the National Institute of Urban Affairs. I retired as professor from there, and even while I was there, we started the capacity building and training, and I've been continuing that. And now I'm advisor, and we are continuing the capacity building and training of urban local bodies all over the country. And we have done more than, now by this year we'll be doing about 5,000 urban local body functionaries in more than about 3,000 or over class 1, 2 and 3 cities in the country. But despite that, I myself am conscious of the fact that the Swachh Bharat mission needs to address this entire thing about climate change resilience, because you can't just build a structure and say that, we've done our job. A superstructure or even a structure like a septic tank or a soak pit is not sufficient. So, as I said, you can see the inadequate coverage. We still don't have adequate STPs, sewage treatment plants, or FSTPs, which means fecal sludge treatment plant. So, after you build a toilet, and you may use it, and if you have a situation like Patna or Varanasi or any of the other places which are now still underwater today, the water has not receded, most of the fecal matter will be out in the street and will be causing greater disaster, because people walking in it might get leptospirosis, might get affected by any number of enteric diseases, or once the water recedes, there may be mosquito breeding like dengue and chikungunya and various other diseases. So it's not over. I mean, in the sense that we have had sanitation campaigns. We all know about it. We started with the total sanitation campaign. We have had Nirmal Bharat Abhiyan. Now it is Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. And Swachh Bharat Abhiyan has done fairly well in taking a lot of loans from the World Bank and also from its own sources and from the corporate sector. And it has also put in an effort for solid waste management, because if you address only sanitation and not solid waste, that will also create the same kind of problems, because solid waste can also create situations, as I said, whether it is methane generation or whether it becomes the breeding ground for vectors and vermin which can transmit diseases. So we know the objectives of the Swachh Bharat mission, and even in terms of the urban areas, I speak only for the urban areas, the household and the community and public toilets. So as of today, this is the status, that many cities have declared themselves as ODF. Many have been certified as ODF, which means open defecation free. When you say ODF plus, it means that it's also being maintained. ODF plus plus means that the excreta and the fecal sludge which comes out is being treated, and it's not being allowed to get into water bodies. That's what these terminologies mean. But at the same time, you find that even though the target has been met in many urban areas, and urban areas don't have that big a challenge about behavioral change. In the rural areas, you might have a toilet, but it's being used for tying a goat or for storing grains or something. But in urban areas, most people who build a toilet want to use it, because even in a slum, it's because of the absence of toilets that people were defecating in the open. There's also the community toilet. But still, as I said, we still have to do a lot of work in terms of resilience, because it might still, the excreta or the sewage or the untreated waste may go into water bodies. Solid waste can also be put into water bodies, and it can cause very severe water stress. The status of solid waste also is that definitely source segregation, door-to-door collection has improved tremendously. And some amount of processing is improved. So in our urban local body training capacity building, our aim has been to say that dry, wet and domestic hazardous waste. People keep on leaving out the domestic hazardous waste. I can tell you this much, it's only 3 to 5%, but it's going to cause you much bigger problem than just only the dry and wet. So please pay attention to it. That's also going on. But we have a huge quantity and it is not being managed responsibly. Even today, waste reduction is the least, and as has already been mentioned by one of the speakers before me, wastage, like they said, the amount of food that is wasted, the amount of material that is wasted which you don't require at all is being thrown, and no waste manager can possibly manage if they do not have adequate methods of reduction. So the dumping as the issues, one of the issues and challenges, as you know, one is methane, the kind of the smoke or the gases which you see, this is it's emanating from the landfills. It's not people setting fire, but it is spontaneous, because if you have methane, methane is highly explosive, highly inflammable, and it will catch fire, and then you will have all the plastic fumes in the air. The other thing is that you see these huge landfills, and when there's rain, you know, so it goes through it. And one of my PhD students and we did an extensive work on Okhla landfill, and we found that the leachate which is coming out as a plume is also moving to all the habitations. So almost all the habitations in about the 5-kilometer radius of the Okhla landfill is contaminated. Even the groundwater aquifers are contaminated with heavy metals, because batteries, paints, that's what I was trying to tell you, the domestic hazardous waste has to be separated, because all that was found in the groundwater. And so I have already explained that methane and subsoil water, blocking of drainage, that is what has caused all the flooding problem. We all know south to north, east to west, and the northeast, the composition of our garbage is wet waste is more than 50%, recyclable is there, and also the domestic hazardous waste. And even small amounts, when we talk about plastics, okay, I don't know what is going to happen about the single-use plastic. It was going to come as a ban, suddenly it was shelved. It has been shelved, nobody knows why. But please remember that toxic plastics like PVC, polyvinyl chloride, like the banners, it's all, flex is all PVC, it's highly dangerous. Some of the shoe soles are made from PVC. Entire shoes are made from PVC. These are highly dangerous substances, because organic chlorine, you know, when it mixes, it causes dioxins. The same way with styrofoam, thermocol, this has polystyrene, and when you do, when you use one-time plastics for plates or cups, these also are going to cause a lot of problems in the environment. So like, like our chairperson has already said, we can go on and on and on. You know, there's a lot of challenges which are there. There is also electronic waste issues. I can show you some pictures about how children are affected, being affected by electronic waste. And I can also show you pictures about how we are having autism in children, because the electronic waste plastics has brominated flame retardants which go into air and which can cause hormonal defects. I can also show you how the plastics, you know, the additives in plastic are crossing the placental barrier and causing you know, effects, hormonal effects in children. I can also show you, you know, what are the kind of you know, effects the plastic waste in India is having. It's not only affecting our water bodies, and this is the kind of recycling. People come and tell me, oh, it gets it's recycled. I said, have you ever gone and seen a recycling industry? And what is happening today? is the messiest, most terrible. I have taken a low volume sampler and gone and measured and been able to, even with the crudest device, been able to detect in atomic absorption spectrophotometers some of these highly toxic substances which are carcinogenic. So I can tell you, and like people have said, it's mostly the poor people who are used to doing this, and of course there is the whole thing about non-biodegradability even in hygiene products which are affecting the biomedical waste. The biomedical waste is also a very big issue where not only the people who are there in the healthcare industry, but also people who have to deal with it after it is sent into the environment. So the issues and challenges of waste management are really very, very big, and we need to build the Swachh Bharat around it and make the entire the further structures that we are going to make, whether it is decentralized solid waste management, segregation at source, composting at home. I do composting at home. I do recycling, it's no problem at all. I live in a second floor house and I still do composting at home. So you can do it using a khamba or whichever way you want. We can do community composting, we can do biomethanation, we can make bio-CNG, we can do recycling of some plastics, especially for structurals, but avoid others, avoid single-use plastics. We have to separate our batteries and paints and pesticides and reduce the use of it by being much more hygienic, and also manage our home healthcare waste, which includes all the biomedical and the hygiene products. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope there are questions which I can answer.
Thank you.